According to the 2022 Data Breach Investigations Report, the human remains the #1 driver of breaches today, demonstrating that cybersecurity is no longer just a technical challenge, but a human one as well. But how do you manage the human risks of cybersecurity? It starts with measurement. Only by effectively quantifying human risk can organizations engage employees with relevant activities to truly change human behavior. That's human risk management. Map key human behaviors to the business risks that matter most to your organization for free by visiting securityweekly.com/living security.
Hi folks, I'm Adrian Sanabria, the host of Enterprise Security Weekly. Every week, we interview the most interesting folks we can find, talking about the most pressing cybersecurity issues and challenges facing the enterprise today. Myself and my co-hosts have each been in the industry for decades, long enough to see the patterns in the industry and explore where trends are going. In addition to enterprise challenges, we also follow the vendor space, the most interesting security startups emerging, technology and product trends, all of the most interesting funding and acquisition announcements. Finally, we love to discuss the latest trends in tech and how they'll impact cybersecurity. If you're wondering how the latest in AI, quantum computing, cloud, and DevOps is going to impact security a few years down the road, you should follow the Enterprise Security Weekly podcast.
Welcome back to Business Security Weekly. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joined by Jason Albuquerque, Ben Carr, and Tyler Robinson. Join us at an upcoming official cybersecurity summit in a city near you. This series of one-day, invitation-only, executive-level conferences are designed to educate senior cyber professionals on the latest threat landscape. We are pleased to offer our listeners $100 off admission when you use code SECWEEK23 to register. Visit securityweekly.com/cybersecurity summit to learn more and register today. All right, gentlemen, articles for the week. I got some good ones in here. I love this. So I started with 1 in 10 CISOs are board ready. And it was interesting because I was in here, they set some criteria for what they consider to be board ready. And I read the list, and in some of it I get, some of it I wasn't quite sure on. And so according to INS, our experience shows that InfoSec tenure, broad experience, scale, advanced education, and diversity are the 5 key traits found in those who are able to successfully move from executive to board director. Really? Is that it?
Yeah, not so much. The other thing in this article as well, though, is that they did their research by looking at LinkedIn profiles. I think is the way that they did their research, if I'm not mistaken. So number one, I mean, come on. I mean, my LinkedIn profile isn't super up to date. You know, I mean, at the end of the day, I try to update it every once in a while, but I think the data source number one is a little wonky. And then from there, you know, that small set of criteria equals board ready. No, I don't think so.
Yeah, like where's your business acumen?
That's it.
Is that considered broad experience? Like, I mean,
I could have 20 years of InfoSec tenure, but if it's 100% technical, I'm not going to have business acumen, right? And if I've been, you know, in a technical role for a couple of decades and not embedded in the business and don't know about the business and don't have education in how to manage a business, you're not board ready.
Which could be a substantial number of people.
Exactly.
Yeah, I also found it odd that they. Yeah, I was just saying, I found it odd that they wanted differentiated experience, right? So that you've spent time outside of cyber, but I question how many CFOs spend time outside of finance, or how many, chief legal officers spend time outside of legal. Like that doesn't really resonate for me. I get the concept that you've got to be exposed to other areas of the business, so conceptually you understand the business in a holistic way. But I don't think it really makes sense to expect somebody who's at a C-level position that they've spent, the cyber guy spent 5 years in the finance department.
Right,
I just don't see how that's ever going to happen.
You know, one of the sentences that they had in here that I do believe is a correct board trait is that you have to have a unique combination of skills versus one superpower. I do believe that. You have to have a diversity in skill set to be board ready, right?
Yeah, agreed.
Not just technical, not just cybersecurity, not just risk. You do have to have a diverse set of skills. But that was the one thing that I pulled out of here that, I fully agreed with without questioning.
And I'll pick out the one that I had a real problem with is have a plan B to look for potential non-CISO candidates with security experience.
Yeah,
like,
right.
I just, again, what are you aiming for? Are you looking for somebody who can help you out with security, or are you just saying that you're trying to bring somebody on with security experience to cover for some other need that you have?
Are you just trying to get a butt in a seat?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and again, my guess is this is based off of the SEC guidance that's coming down around having somebody sit on your board with cybersecurity experience. And so somebody's decided they're going to go out and research the market to see how many qualified CISOs there are. I'm not sure that this criteria is the right matching set, but I see where it's coming from.
Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, the exercise is important. I think the diligence in the exercise is what lacked, right? That's where I view this article. Number one, LinkedIn profile is definitely not the right data source. I think at the end of the day, they should have been out there speaking to CISOs, speaking to those leaders, speaking to CISOs who sit on boards, speaking to aspiring CISOs aspiring to be on boards, and really get that holistic view. And so that way you can get the true traits of what a successful board member would be from a cybersecurity perspective.
Yeah, and understanding like why you're trying to bring a cybersecurity expert onto the board in the first place. Like, what is the metric you're trying to go after, right? Is it somebody who has experience, who can ask the right questions in the boardroom of your security team to understand, is your security team up to par? Are they doing the things that they should be? Or are there gaps that you wouldn't have otherwise identified unless you had someone with cyber experience on there? Again, I think going with the plan B, if somebody who has peripheral experience but doesn't really understand it isn't going to get you to that goal. And that's, I think, why we're seeing the SEC come down with this guidance and trying to change this, because too many companies haven't asked these questions. I mean, Jason, Tyler, I mean, like, how many companies can you say that if you've sat in the board and listened to the board discussions that they're actually asking these questions? They're not. And that's the problem. When we talk to our compatriots and our colleagues, we're hearing the same thing. Like, it's almost laughable in some cases.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah. Next article, 3 CISOs provide guidance on making the business case for cybersecurity. I did not download the white paper.
I did.
So I didn't. Did you?
I did. And I read it. I thought it was pretty good. I mean, it's items that we talk about on this show all the time and have been for probably 5 years. But at the end of the day, I'm glad it's getting the notoriety and the promotion and out there, so that way we can have these conversations. It was focused on Canadian CISOs, but it went through a bunch of different industries, right? So a CISO from the gaming industry, a CISO from transportation, and then another from construction. It went through and talked about what those CISOs' top concerns were, and then went through and said, and just basically asked, how are you making the business case to your leaders in order to influence and move the needle? So it was very, very interesting. There were a lot of overlap between the CISOs as far as, how they influence, speak the language of the business. One of the biggest items in there, right? Build relationships, influence. Let's influence the other business unit leaders. Communication is one of the largest values that you have to have, the ability to communicate. So if you couple all that, strong relationship, ability to communicate, speak the language of the business, and then understand risk tolerance, obviously, right? So it's all the things we talk about here on this show. The interesting part was to learn a little bit about these different industries and really what motivates them for change. Taking the gaming industry, it's a whole other world, right? Taking construction, a whole other world. The challenge that a CISO in construction has is everything in construction has a project or a purchase or a budget, a very definitive timeline. There's a ton of capital investment up front. That culture influences the way they buy cybersecurity and invest in cybersecurity, right? So if you can't show tangible ROI and you can't show a timeline to when you'll get adoption, you're going to get your request thrown out, right? So it's very interesting to see how the different industries kind of handle based on their culture, the industry of the culture.
It reminds me of the oil and gas discussions I used to have when I was at RSA. Same thing, right? Lots of capital investment, lots of exploration to go find stuff. Like, risk factors there, they're like, it has to have like $1 billion impact for us to even think about it from a risk tolerance perspective, right? I mean, how many cybersecurity events get to $1 billion threshold, right? It's just thought of completely different in that industry.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the same problem we faced at Visa, right? Like the value of the risk had to be so high compared to other risks to the business because the other risks to the business were very large, right? And so selling that, you're either selling on a massive FUD use case, or you're trying to figure out how to make it all make sense when the numbers are in somewhat their guesses, and you don't have the underlying data because you don't have the asset information, right? And you don't have the context awareness of the whole organization to be able to put accurate numbers to it. So it's a bit of a science, but it's super hard. And I think both this article and the previous one, I mean, they call out for training, right, and career progression and investing. Companies need to invest in, CISOs need to invest in people they're bringing up in the teams. You need to invest in holistic education around the business, not just technical cyber training, right? If your track is to become a CISO, figure out how you're going to do career and professional development.
Yeah, and understand the business, because again, the polar opposite is the gaming industry. So you have to understand your business, and you have to go in there and start learning the culture of your industry. The gaming industry is, the mantra was, the challenge is to conform to regulations without being constrained by the regulations, right? So, I mean, this is an industry where when the CISOs, first took the helm, they didn't take cybersecurity seriously at all, because their entire mantra was, we're regulated, but we got to figure out how to make regulation non-friction at all, and we got to try to get through that.
Jason, it's super funny because, like, I actually spent time in that industry, right? And so I went into it. I worked for a company that was in the gaming side, casino gaming, right? And the first thing they told me when I come in is, we're highly regulated. And I went in and I'm like, okay, talk to me about your regulation. Well, Nevada Gaming Commission.
Yep.
Okay, well, that's not highly regulated in our world, right?
Exactly.
Like, you're Australian, so no HIPAA, no GLBA, no SOX, no FISMA, no, nothing, right? And so when you break that down and the differentiation of what the business believes and what the business is doing as their core business versus what you believe is the CISO and what the risk strategy is, be completely misaligned. So you've got to make sure you do understand the business, to understand what the risk is and how they're contextualized.
Right. And the appetite for that risk. Yeah, no doubt about it. So 100%. It just pushes the fact that you have to learn the business when you're in that role. Have to.
Absolutely. Talking about appetite, cyber insurance rates seem to be flattening, at least increases. Maybe that's because not as many people are getting insured, Jason. I don't know.
Maybe it's because they're kicking so many people off of their policies. Maybe that's why. I mean, we've talked about it here before about, organizations in entire industries getting letters of, hey, if you don't comply by such and such a date, we're going to drop your insurance. So, maybe that has to do it. But then if you start to read through the article, though, it basically says that Fitch ratings are forecasted to hit 22.5 billion by 2025 from 10 billion globally in 2022. So it's still going up.
Still going up.
It's still going to go up.
Yeah, but there's been pushback in the market, right? A lot of people are considering, do I self-insure? Do I keep my policy at the same level of coverage that I have? I mean, I think every company's trying to do this. And so I think that it's almost a supply and demand curve, right?
Yeah.
When people are pulling back, they're trying to figure out, okay, how do we keep the premium so at an aggregate we're still getting more, but the dollars maybe aren't on the same curve that they were previously.
Yeah, the challenges that I've been seeing with organizations trying to either do the self-insure or kind of tether it down a little bit is you need that COI for vendor risk assessment. And if you don't make the criteria for vendor risk, guess what? You can't do business with that potential client. So that's where I've seen the challenge, that even though organizations are saying, I'm gonna take back the spend, I'm gonna self-insure, the first time they get a challenge from a client that says you do not meet our vendor risk assessment criteria for insurance, guess what they do? They go call, they make a change, they get it updated, so that way they can continue to sell.
Do we see that starting to change or shift at all, or push back from people that are trying to do this procurement? Because we're seeing a lot of places where the cyber insurance has become a check the box. Yes, cyber insurance is getting better. Yes, we've got assessments that are leading to more secure companies, and I still firmly believe that is a great place to make change. But we're also seeing a lot of places not get the coverage that they need, or if there is an event, they're not being covered because there's some loophole. Just like the old insurance adage, we've started to see those fine print details come to light inside your cyber insurance policies. And so do you see pushback starting to happen from people not carrying cyber insurance and doing that self-insured stuff and then pushing back on the procurement process for the contracts? Or do you think that will become a trend?
You mean the third-party risk, third-party contract? That when they come back and say, hey, you're not sure? Yeah, like not just for that function. I think there is a general pushback against third-party risk, right? Because there was I think after the SolarWinds issue and a couple other things, right, in that same time frame, there was a lot more interest in third-party risk. I still think it's a big growth area, but I think there are people who are pushing back. Like I personally have experiences where I've gone in and said, hey, I'm not getting the information I need, and I've been told by the vendor, well, that's what we're going to give you. Yeah. And so then it's up to you to decide, like, is it business critical enough? And it becomes this contextual fight with, not fight, it's a friction point with the business, right? Trying to figure out, do I allow them to move forward or not? And do I put part of the business in jeopardy? Is there another vendor that's equivalent? So, I mean, you think about it, I won't pick on anybody, but think about any of the 800-pound gorillas in any part of your ecosystem. If that 800-pound gorilla said, yeah, tough, you take it or leave it, what do you do? Who do you go with if it's not that 800-pound gorilla? That becomes a real challenge.
It opens up negotiation. That's what I've seen, right? Where you're negotiating back and forth now, and they come back and they say, this is all I'm going to give you. I do not have X, Y, and Z. Take it or leave it. And then you have to go back and figure out whether or not that meets your risk criteria. And if you're good with that risk, then you'll continue on. If not, you have to cut ties.
Yeah, but it's really
and that's
hard,
what risk
Jason.
acceptance is all about.
Yeah, right.
I know. But it's hard because I manage a third-party vendor risk management program. It's very hard to get the business to change off of their preferred partners.
It is.
Even though there is a risk there.
Right.
Yeah. 11 books for your cybersecurity summer reading. I brought this in for anybody who's looking for good content to read. These are recommendations from folks in the industry. Now, I just finished, more on the business side, Escape Velocity.
Oh, nice.
So this is a book after Crossing the Chasm, after Never Split the Difference. It kind of brings in some of these concepts on how to build Escape Velocity. It's part of our strategic planning reading for the rest of 23 into 24.
Nice.
And it's, having read a lot of the other business books, it brings those books in and kind of brings it all together. But I figured somebody needed something more exciting to read than another.
See, I went down the path of the more technology focused route, because it's funny that you had it in here, The Age of AI. I purchased that audiobook like 2 weeks ago. So that's on my summer listening list, not reading list, but my listening list.
Yeah, there's a couple on artificial intelligence that I think, we're definitely towards the top of the list, just to understand the impact of AI and what's coming, right? I don't know if Ben or Tyler read or are planning to read any of these. Just curious.
Yeah, I like the AI side of the house. I mean, I think that's something everybody's, as you guys have articulated, it's trying to focus down on that as an emerging topic. I've focused on, I've got a couple books on my library that are Jocko. I like the stuff he's doing on leadership. I've been really trying to focus less on the technical and more on the leadership. So that's kind of been the route I've been going down.
Yeah, the AI side of integrating into business and really getting a grasp on what does this mean long term, and what is the responsible route. Like we've been attacking and playing with AI for the better part of 5+ years, and it's just barely becoming mainstream topic to where it has a little bit of traction and or has the ability to be very confusing and cause some intricacies with inside of privacy and where we're moving as a society and as businesses. So really understanding and articulating that risk in a business nuance is becoming very difficult, I think, without all the FUD. Right? There is a lot of great things that can happen with AI. There's a lot of things that are misnomers with machine learning and the degenerative part of how we're doing the training models and what training models actually mean with inside the industry. So I think really getting a grasp of the way other people are articulating this for the business use case, as well as articulating the business risk and things that are not being discussed from a societal standpoint and big picture long term, I think those are the things that I'm really focused on. And so I've been trying to read basically anything that has some kind of business knowledge around the AI piece without a lot of the technical aptitude. So with an author that understands the technical aptitude, so I can kind of get a grasp on how to better bring this conversation to the business, because like I said, we've been doing this 5-6 years and it's not been articulated well enough in mainstream for leaders to have a grasp on how to deal with this properly, and or even the risks that they're going to have to adopt and or look at in the future.
Yeah, and we can't get away from the confusion in the FUD either, because I mean, it doesn't help when, OpenAI CEO, along with, 12 other leaders in AI, come out last month with one statement that basically says, we have to focus globally on AI because it could risk extinction of the human race. I mean, the quote was, mitigating the risk of extinction from AI should be a global priority alongside with other societal scale risks such as pandemics and nuclear war. That's coming out of all of the AI leaders in the world. So now be a CEO and listen to that. Tell me that's not going to bubble up fear. Tell me that's not going to bubble up fear to the consumer market. I mean, we can't escape it. So yes, we have to learn about it. We have to be able to navigate all this.
And yet no one is taking it seriously enough because they don't want to be left behind because of the business edge that it's providing early out of the gate. So we're all running headlong into a cliff that we have no idea what's going to happen, but we don't want to be the last one to that cliff.
Right. Which is a perfect lead into the next article. Why conflicting ideas can make your strategy stronger. Because one of these conversations in the strategy discussion is this concept of, do I go all in with generative AI? Don't I? What's the right balance? Right. And again, as I said, I've been reading Escape Velocity as part of our strategy planning work for the rest of 23 into 24. And what it does a really good job of from a strategic perspective is mapping out what they call the hierarchy of power. Starts with category, company, market, offer, execution, right? And at each of those different levels, there's obviously decision points that you have to make in each one of those, right? But it starts at the top and kind of works its way down. So as we've been doing this planning, I've been kind of going back and forth with Ashley about, well, what is the market, the category we're in, right? We're in security awareness and training. We're moving to this thing called human risk management. So are we building the strategy for human risk management or security awareness and training? Because each of those decisions help you start to articulate like all the rest of the pieces, like category down to company, market, et cetera, because you have to make very key decisions from a strategic perspective based on the answers to the previous position, right? And so it's been a fun little exercise because you start to have this dialogue. You start questioning like, well, what market are we going after? And who is our reference competitor? And what is our crown jewels that are going to give us that differentiated offer in the market to get people to move to you? Like, this is what strategy is about.
Right. And you have to have a culture within your organization that you can respectfully and professionally disagree and debate. Right. I mean, that's kind of what this article is about, is that you need to have an environment where you can have these professional debates and you can go back and forth.
That's a signature and a red mark if you're looking at a leader and there's not the allowance for debate, right? Like I really believe like you have to bring in people who have a difference of opinion, because that's the only way you get to have those hard conversations that get to a truth.
Right. Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. Otherwise you're executing on a strategy that is just what everybody believes to be the marching order.
It becomes groupthink,
the echo
right?
chamber.
You don't want groupthink.
But what happens when you're not the leader and you are the one that falls underneath of those leaders? I'm actually just got done dealing with or dealing with this in several places I'm doing consultancy advisory for, is the people that have been driving the initiatives, driving the thought, did not approve of having any additional thought or input, and therefore everyone had to march with this, and it happened for so long that now no one changing that culture and getting people into a comfort zone of being allowed to do that has become very difficult, and or it has also led to a organization that is very kind of ingrained in their ways now, and,
Sure.
and not because they have to be anymore, but because that's how it's been, and it's very difficult for them to come out of that too.
Right,
so how do
right.
you begin to change that conversation if you're not the leader driving those conversations
Step
and
one,
being open-minded?
I've seen this before. Step
build
one
trust.
is for that leader to admit that they're open to debate now, to be able to empower the leaders that fall under them to make decisions, right? I've seen a ton of small companies that I've helped out. Think about this. You have a founder and a CEO who started the company 30 years ago. They were hands-on, in the weeds every day, all day, and then they grew. They were so used to having their finger on the pulse of everything within the organization, every decision in the organization. How do you unwind that? The only way to unwind that is for that leader to sit back and say, I'm trusting my leaders, and when people come to me, I divert them to where they need to go in my org chart. Boom. And start pushing. The culture has to start with the folks created that culture to begin with. Otherwise, it will never change.
Agreed. In the book that I just finished reading, talks about this from an execution perspective. It lays out the different execution paths depending on where you are and what you're trying to get to, and who are the right leaders to take those different initiatives forward. And I think that's one of the challenges that startups, for example, have when it comes to a founder, CEO kind of structure. It also happens, to Tyler's point a little bit, when you kind of get into a status quo and you don't know how to get out of it.
Yeah,
right? You need different leadership and those different execution strategies to be able to get out of it.
Yeah, and that's where a strong leadership team, a very cohesive leadership team, comes into play, because you always have to have each other's back in order to take that culture and migrate it to where it needs to be, right? So, the couple other things I loved in this article was, they made, kind of 3 points about how to start building that culture. And, one of them was act as examples, and also, understand that you can tell multiple stories and not be disingenuous, right? You can tell a narrative one way to a certain audience, a narrative another way to a different audience, but also the narrative can change based on knowledge coming in and change of information coming in. And not to think that person was lying or trying to, to misstep or anything like that, or be malicious about it. It's information changes, and you can change a narrative as you get more information. And then the other piece is set the new norms, which was allow your employees to test out thoughts without any repercussions, right? Allow them to test out thoughts and mature their thinking and mature, the thought process that they have. With good, solid guardrails there, it can be a great exercise for your team. And it just makes them comfortable in expressing how they feel in their professional opinions.
The IBM use case was referenced many times in the book and in this article for the exact same reasons. Yep. All right, last article, communication barriers and how to address them. Again, these are challenges. The first one, physical barriers. We were talking about this before the show, Jason, about getting out of the house.
Yep, exactly it.
Getting back into the physical world, like
100%.
Going to Austin and sitting down and hammering out, some conversations in person versus over Zoom. Like, physical barriers from a communication perspective are real. They're real today.
Yeah, I know. And the more and more you see folks working in these shared spaces too, the distractions that can happen in meetings and the noise that is happening in meetings, it can really overwhelm a conversation. So be cognizant of that. If you have a meeting that you need folks to be focused on and attentive to, make sure that you're in a spot where it's not gonna be distractive. The other one was the psychological barriers. That's something like, we're hearing so many people talk about confidence crisis now coming out of the pandemic and having cabin fever and, really, really playing that psychological toll on them. That's something we definitely have to think about and make sure we're helping our folks out with.
Yeah, I mean, these are all good examples. When I think of cultural barriers, I often go back to this thought from when I worked at Nokia. And working in a very large multinational organization where we actually had a PowerPoint that said, if you hear something in English, it means this. If you hear it in Indian, it means this. And if you hear it in Finnish, it means this. And they were three different things, right? So your expectation based upon your cultural analysis of the situation may be completely wrong. Right. So I think you've got to take all these things into account when you're having communication problems internally with a company, whether it's psychological or cultural or technical, physical. I mean, as we've moved to remote work, remote work doesn't mean do what you want. You still have to act in a professional environment. And if you're in a tank top with sunglasses on the beach having a conversation while everybody else is at the home office, it doesn't set a good tone. And so I think it's just keeping contextually aware of what's going on and making sure you're operating inside those norms.
Yeah. Another one in here that I know causes a lot of friction within businesses too is the lack of visual cues and context. Right?
Yeah.
This is why I have that mantra of 3 emails back and forth, 3 chats back and forth, and you're still not on the same page.
Pick up the phone.
Get on a damn video call so you can see each other, and you can talk through it, and you can hear the emotion, you can see reaction, and you can have that more physical presence, so you can get to that outcome quicker, because the back and forth, you don't understand the tone of the message, you don't understand the intentions. It can go down this rabbit hole that could take days to get to an outcome that could take 3 minutes on a video call.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even when I was in Austin a couple of weeks ago, just getting on the whiteboard and kind of laying out all the pieces we wanted to review was huge. From just wrapping our arms around the things we're trying to solve, just to have us all in the same location with the whiteboard was a huge step forward, because otherwise you're working out a spreadsheet, you're looking at things in rows in a spreadsheet, but when you lay it out on the whiteboard, it becomes very clear, like, oh yeah, those are the gaps we have to go address.
Yeah, I mean, there's that old rule of thumb, right? 7% is the words, right? 38% is your voice and your tone, and 55% is your body language. So, when you think about that, like, just doing it through email is not getting you very clear on a conversational level.
Not. Gentlemen, always a pleasure. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you everyone for watching and listening. We'll see you in 2 weeks on Business Security Weekly.